bakers, florists, anyone working in a wedding related industry, what is your best Bridezilla story? Worked at a reception venue. One event really sticks out. Everything went well until the cake. Bride and groom go to feed each other. She does it very nice. He smashes it into her face. Bride screams, starts bawling her eyes out and runs out of the hall. 15 or so minutes later the father of the bride comes and asks the DJ for the mic. He proceeds to thank everyone for coming and says that if they would like to take their gifts on the way out the couple has decided to break up. I'm sure there were issues leading up to the event, but the bride had told everyone including the groom that if he smashed the cake in her face, it was over. She wasn't lying. As silly as it is, I kinda admire her follow through. I worked as a wedding photographer for many years. My favorite story is of a bride who was having a huge wedding where her parents lived, across the country from where she lived. By huge, I mean 22 people in the wedding party. They had to rent 2 limos to hold them all. The bride and her girls started drinking heavily at 8 AM, with champagne while getting their hair and make done. They followed 4 bottles of bubbly with a bottle of whiskey to help them get dressed. I honestly stopped paying attention at that point, but the pace didn't slow down. By 11 AM the bride is lit and pee. She came down to the reception area where the florist, the best local florist and a lady I worked with regularly, was creating the centerpieces. They were large glass cylinders with lights and glass balls at the bottom, filled with flowers and then water. Bridezilla decided that the lights weren't buried deep enough in the glass balls, and made the florist pour out and recreate about 10 of these things. She was a real bee about it too, yelling at the florist and carrying on about 1/4 of glass beads less or more. After she stumbled down the aisle to her less drunk groom, I tried to do formal photos. Bridezilla wasn't having any of my posing. Oh no, she had her own ideas of what would look good. I shot them anyway. It's what the customer wanted, right? She was so drunk and belligerent, honestly I just wanted the session to end. But with 22 people in the party, it wasn't going to be short no matter what I did. Some of the shots were outside, at a local golf course. It started to sprinkle after a few frames. Bridezilla made a beeline for the limo so her hair wouldn't get ruined. By the midpoint of the reception, her brand new husband was apologizing for her. If you are apologizing for the behavior of the woman you married 3 hours ago, you're doing it wrong. When I delivered the photos, you could hear her screaming 2,000 miles away. The posing sucked. The lighting sucked. She wanted more stuff at the golf course. Basically, everything she had told me she wanted, she complained about, threatened not to pay, etc. After tons of angst on my part, I figured out that her primary problem was that she didn't have good bridal portraits to put on her walls. I agreed to comp her a bridal photo session the next time they were in town. The best part? When she came in for the bridal session, she was sober and a different person. Sweet, helpful, listened and posed perfectly. The photos came out looking like $1 million. She was thrilled with them, paid in full, and even referred a couple of her friends my way. TLDR. Don't let alcohol release the inner bee on your wedding day. You'll regret it, but not as much as your new husband will. This is something that every married person should instill in every soon-to-be married person. Don't get drunk at your own wedding. My wife and I had 1 or 2 drinks each at our wedding. That's it. We had a freaking blast. I simply cannot understand why people want to spend upwards of $30,000 for a party, then get wasted, don't remember a thing, or worse, ruin it. I worked at a bridal clothing store for about a year in high school. The only story that really stands out is more about the mother of the bride than the bride. One day a bride and her mother come in the store looking for a bridal gown. I approached them and things immediately started going downhill. The mother and daughter were on completely different wavelengths and I could hardly get a word in over their loud bickering. I finally was able to get a word in and discover that her wedding is in a few months and has to find a dress, like yesterday. This just adds to the tension because it takes several months to get a dress in and altered. So basically we need to find a dress off the rack. Thank gosh she fit into the sample sizes. Anyways, every dress she tries on her mother comments in a negative way. That dress makes you look hippie. That dress looks too cheap. Lace isn't your thing. That dress makes you look like a S. just reaming her daughter. Eventually the bride breaks down and starts crying and I have to go console her as best I could. Remember, I'm still only 17 trying to comfort a grown woman at least 10 years my senior. Finally she finds a dress that she and her mother can agree upon. We go to pay for it and the mother insists her daughter wears a new dress. I explain it's going to be a close call on shipping and everything, but she insists her daughter won't wear a dirty dress. I order the dress and the mother calls every day for months asking about the dress, in varying degrees of discourteousness. Thankfully the dress made it in time, but our alterations lady was working up until the day of the bride's wedding to finish it. The bride had her final fitting at her venue all because her mother made her dress experience so awful she waited until the last possible minute to buy a dress. Oh, and the mother never thanked the alterations lady for rushing to finish the dress. Thank goodness the daughter was very polite and sent us a card thanking us for what we had done for her and for putting up with her mother. Weddings can make people totally insane. My mom wasn't nearly as bad as that, but she is normally an incredibly sweet and polite woman, and I actually had to take her aside when we were talking to a florist and tell her that she needed to control herself and that she was being pretty rude. It was insane because she just isn't like that. I dunno. I worked as a caterer and a wedding DJ for about 15 years. Here goes. I was DJing a wedding in a shabby little reception hall out in the middle of the sticks for a redneck bride and groom. The bride was wasted by the time I started playing my set, around 8 PM. She came up to me right away and told me that I need to play the song Save a Horse Ride a Cowboy like every 4 songs, and I tried to tell her that it's a bad idea but she insisted, so I agreed. About an hour into the night I play the song for the 10th time and people in the crowd start to boo. Please note that every time I played the song I passed it off onto the bride by saying something like it's time for a special request from the bride as not to destroy my reputation. So people boo and start walking off the dance floor. Bride sees this and loses her crap. She runs up to the stage and demands the mic. "You dumb mother suckers, get back on this dance floor or this freaking thing is done," she wailed into the mic. Her guests ignore her. She yells again and no one pays her any attention. She then marches over to the cake and gift table and flips it over, yelling, "Everyone get the frick out of my wedding." Her guests, who did not seem all that surprised, end up leaving. I still get paid, so in the end it did not matter too much from my end, but wow. Just wow. One lucky guy. I worked in alterations at a chain bridal store for a couple years. The amount of crap I saw go down was ridiculous, but one of my favorite stories was the bride who refused to let me fit her in her gown because I have short hair and didn't want to be touched by a disgusting lesbian. First I laughed her off because I thought she was just making a poor joke in poor taste, but then when I tried to help her into the gown, she started freaking out and made a huge fuss. The mom got involved and threatened to have me fired for trying to violate her daughter. When I assured her that I am, in fact, straight, she insisted I have my manager come out and vouch for my orientation. Finally, I put her in the dress and she bursts into tears and starts screaming at me about how I made her dress too tight and how she looked fat and terrible in it. And I just looked at her and said, "Mom, I haven't altered your dress yet. This is a first fitting to see what sort of alterations need to be done." Justice. Worked for a catering company owned by my friend's mother for a summer. Bride wants a buffet style service and she chooses about a dozen different dishes plus sides and 2 different salads. Price isn't an option, so she picks some pretty nice stuff. We did a few types of fish, bacon wrapped fillets, grilled and fried chicken and various other fun stuff like mussels and clams. She had over 200 people at her wedding, so we cooked up a feast and it was presented beautifully. The food was great. We tried everything, obviously, before putting it out. Everything went perfectly. We were a pretty small company, so this was a big deal for us. Anyways, about an hour into the reception, a few bridesmaids are wasted. The bridegroom are decently drunk, but nowhere near the maids. One of them loses it and starts puking in the bushes. There are enough people there and enough going on at the time that it didn't cause a scene. No one was really paying attention, and the bridesmaid who puked did it pretty nonchalantly. The bride flipped the frick out. She automatically assumed it was the food, not the alcohol, that caused her friend to vomit. She stands up and screams, "Nobody eat the food. You'll get sick." I calmly approached the bride, as best as I could, with a co-worker and explained that the food was fine and that people would not get sick. She wasn't having it. She took an empty pitcher that we used to serve water in, dunked it in the swimming pool, and proceeded to drown the food trays with chlorinated water, thus ruining everything. She then made a bigger scene by personally clearing everyone's plate, despite people telling her to sit down and relax. She was crying hysterically. Her deadbeat new husband did nothing, just sat there and watched. We ended up leaving with only the deposit. She refused to pay us the rest. We took her to court and she won. She tried to countersue the company but lost. I left after that summer and vowed to never work in the service industry again. I work at a reception venue. Once had a bride snort see off the bridal table, then found her new husband in another room with a bridesmaid. Was the most interesting work shift ever. She threw her shoe through the window. She threw her shoe through the window. Honestly, it feels like the logical reaction. Before I got into catering, I worked at an art museum which also hosted a lot of really schmancy weddings. Big, beautiful old building that was very expensive to rent, so it hosted a lot of six-figure weddings, some of which were more tasteful than others. One of my first brides was a girl who loved the building but hated the wall color. At the time, the interior was painted a beautiful but very bright color. She was obsessed. For months she tried to get me to have the walls repainted white. Nope. The day of the wedding rolls around and in an effort to downplay the wall color, she has made everything black. Tablecloths, chairs, bridesmaid dresses, everything. She also had these purple flashing LED flower vases that were pretty horrible. Her DJ was a prick and played a bunch of songs that are hilariously inappropriate for weddings. Shorts, big pimping, that sort of thing. Everyone got S-faced. We had to kick the maid of honor out of the museum after we caught her trying to steal a bottle of liquor from the bar. The saddest thing, though, right after dinner, the bride and groom's crotchety Asian parents hopped in the limo intended for the bride and groom, rode back to the hotel, and didn't come back. The limo never resurfaced either. I had to watch the bride try to dump her plastered husband in the back of a cab while her useless bridesmaids just stood there and laughed. Ouch. I also had a client who was the daughter of a filthy rich international hotel mogul. They spent so much money that it felt vulgar, even by our standards. Custom one-time use silk linens, rose pomanders several feet around, that sort of thing. It was the one event I've done where instead of admiring my fellow vendors' skills and artistry, I just felt icky, like I could hear the screams of thousands and thousands of dying flowers. There is a point where something can be used up to create something valuable or useful. The plants are killed to create a beautiful work of art, for instance. On the other hand, there's a point where it's just being done to flaunt their excess, and any sacrifice involved just seems wasted. Bartended at a venue that was formerly a church, lots of weddings. Also was a live music venue. Had Deadmore CTC play there, so there is a large security staff that works the events as needed. This is important as this wedding was being worked by Charles and Kendall, two very nice, very large black guys who usually worked hop nights. Wiry little redneck father of the bride gets smushed on Jim Beam and somehow gets it into his head that one or both of the security guys has been stealing presents and very loudly starts accusing them of the same in a medium-sized meeting dressing room adjacent to the reception. Crap got real when he put his index finger into Kendall's chest and calls him boy while calling him a freaking thief. In space of a second I see Kendall weigh the cost benefits of beating this man badly in front of his family, definitely losing a part-time job and possibly getting arrested. Somehow he decides to not beat him to death, but the dad won't drop it. He calls the police and the manager part owner stops the reception then and there, kicks everyone out and charges the family full price for everything, which totaled over $20,000. It was pretty sweet. I love when you can see the thoughts going through someone's head just by watching their face body language. You just sit there and go, oh crap, it's about to get real. About the mother of the groom, but I'll tell it anyway. I'm 20 years old and for some reason I take a job off Craigslist to work as a wedding DJ. They hired me after one interview and I was put into training that weekend. I showed up at some storage facility and saw my other 7 or so fellow trainees. Since the ad was on Craigslist, I'm sure you can imagine the variety of people. The only thing I remember from training was my boss saying, if someone offers you a drink you turn it down. It looks bad for our company. However, if someone offers you a keg stand, you must do it. I do a few weddings and it is going about as well as you can imagine a 20-year-old hosting weddings. I'm on my 3rd wedding or so and I notice the atmosphere is definitely thicker than my other events. The groom is peeved because his mother is drunk. He keeps coming up and telling me not to give her the microphone. Each time he leaves, his mother comes up to me and starts hitting on me trying to steal the microphone. After a few revolutions of the shitshow carousel, the mother of the groom comes up to me and shows me she snuck in a 5th of Jack Daniels. There was an open bar. I have no idea why she did this. Maybe she was planning on being cut off. She then slurs to me. Some people call me a cowger. I like to call myself a minx SSSSSSS. And goes back to work inventing twerking on the dance floor. The groom sees this, gets pee, takes his bride and just leaves. Like gone. As in not coming back. Apparently this puts me in charge of the reception now. I proceeded to alternate baby got back and girls just want to have fun while she booty pops as the guests slowly mingle out. TL. DR. Didn't take free drinks. Didn't frick the minx. I proceeded to alternate baby got back and girls just want to have fun. I think this should be code for bail people. Bail out. I'm being paid for this but you aren't. Abandon ship. Run. Ruin. I'm a baker. This isn't my story but my boss's story. Bride wanted a 5-layer cake. The act of putting one cake on top of another is $60. Plus deco fees if you want it to look seamless. Ribbon or something. So this cake is going to cost her a lot. Deco flowers are crazy expensive and not worth it. So we always advise brides to use fake plastic flowers or real ones. This bride wanted real ones. She said they would be at the hall, waiting on us. We do the cake, just how she wanted and go to the hall to set up. The wedding planner is there too. We set up everything and start looking for our flowers. The wedding planner has no clue what we're talking. She only had enough flowers for the table centerpieces. We start to panic. She wanted flowers and paid our fee for putting flowers on the cake. We start looking everywhere. Can't call the wedding party since, you know, they're busy. So, we steal a few flowers out of every centerpiece to fill the empty places on the cake. It isn't as full as it should be, but it looked okay. The next day she calls, crying her eyes out. We ruined her wedding day and she wants a full refund. We told her what happened on our end and she screams at us that we ruined her day. My boss asks where the flowers are for her cake and she tells us that she never ordered extra flowers. My boss just laughs and explains to her that we told her she needed to provide the flowers, and it was in the contract she signed with us. I'm not totally sure what happened after that, but my boss tells everyone in the restaurant bakery that no one from this point on is allowed to book wedding cakes without her there to talk to the bride, or whoever is ordering the cake. I do a little wedding photography, most of them with my aunt. I've done a few smaller ones on my own. Usually for people I know that are just looking for a record of their big day. I still edit them up and make them look nice but it's usually only a small ceremony and a reception. Anyways, a few years ago my aunt referred a bride to me because she was going to be out of town but was sure I could handle it. Now, I was 18 at the time and sort of a pushover. Plenty of brides had gotten a real steal for their photography because I was scared to charge too much. So this bride calls me and started asking me questions. I answered all of them and when I gave her my price, $750 for the whole thing. I'm talking hair and makeup, getting dressed for both parties, the ceremony, reception, and they're leaving. She quickly tried to haggle me down. I agreed and brought it down to $600, which really leaves me with little to nothing for the amount of time I would be spending on the project. And she told me she would get back to me. A few days later she calls and tells me that a girl she went to high school with is going to do them for free and that she wouldn't be needing my services. Which was fine. I didn't really want to do it for that cheap and hey, my Saturday opened back up. So on the day of her wedding, in the middle of a day trip I decided to take since she explicitly told me she wouldn't need me, She calls and asked where I was. I kindly reminded her that she had told me that her friend was doing it for her and I wasn't needed, and that there was nothing that could be done anyway because I was at least 3 hours away from her venue and did not have any of my equipment ready when she insisted that she said nothing of the sort. I'm not sure what ended up happening. I like to assume her friend pulled through, but I'm sure she has nothing good to say about me to her friends, but I don't do much photography anymore, so it's whatever. That's one of the reasons I don't do it anymore. I just don't have the time or patience to deal with people like that anymore. I worked as a bridal fitting assistant in a wedding dress shop, and honestly, 99% of the customers we had were absolutely lovely. People were so happy, especially if they just got engaged and were looking at dresses for the first time, that we rarely had Bridezillas. Probably the worst I ever saw was a woman who claimed her fiance had died, so she wanted a refund. Then she came back in demanding the same dress back because they'd made up. Turns out he wasn't dead after all. I'm sure stories from people who work closer to the big day, or on the day itself, are much worse. Sisters, friends, and mothers though, that's another story. I've seen men a bride reduced to tears because they walked out in their dream dress and their best friend called them fat, or their sister pulled a face. I've witnessed arguments over the suitability of the groom. I've heard mothers be that there's no point getting married when the bride was already knocked up, etc etc. This is not too crazy, but we also used to rent out petticoats rather than selling them. I once took back a petticoat from a bride's mother that was 2 or 3 days past the due return date. While coughing all over me, she told me she'd been late to bring it back because she had swine flu. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.